Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Jeff, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Real excited to hear your story and share it. I am located where you were born and raised in St. Louis. I believe you are no longer living here, though. Where are you calling in from? Where's home base for you now?
Look at this. I'm even drinking out of a St. Louis Blues jumper.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm out of Virginia Beach area.
Okay. Awesome. Well, to kick off, we're going to start with our intro questions. I know that you have two daughters. If they did, or if they would have approached you, telling you they wanted to join the military, what did you do? What would you have done? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good one, especially with two daughters. Two sons, I'd be like, doing my best to guide them. My hesitation for the daughters is just, it's a male-dominated environment. Encountering all the challenges along with that. However, I think some of those challenges are probably exaggerated, and it would be a great environment for them to kind of grow professionally and character as well. I mean, that's the experience that I had and my growth, and the challenges presented to me in the military were phenomenal. I mean, really, it completely shapes who you are. And if they had that chance, I would definitely encourage that. In fact, my youngest was, expressed a little interest in being a helicopter pilot. So we, being in Virginia Beach, our neighbor, was a 53, pilot. So I told him, and he got us into their flight simulator up in North Island.
Cool.
I mean, I'm sorry, North San Diego, up in Norfolk. So it was a great experience for her. It opened her eyes. I think, I haven't confirmed that, I think that's still kind of in her, she's a junior in college, so I think that's still kind of in her little maybe list of potential careers. I don't know, but the punchline is I would encourage them, only because what a phenomenal way to be challenged and grow, and give you life skills after that. So the answer is yes. Yeah.
Totally agreed. Amazing. So moving along is this concept that I've been exploring more lately, and given what you're doing with Oplign, which is very connected to bridging veterans into civilian workspace in general. I'm very intrigued by how you're going to approach this question, which is naturally, as veterans join the civilian workforce, there's cultural gaps that exist, and vice versa, right? So civilians to veterans. How do you see us better kind of bridging that gap and making a more seamless process, which doesn't necessarily have to be one moment? It could be gradual over time. What's your take? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I experienced that firsthand. So I think we'll get in my background, but my first civilian job, I saw that kind of gap firsthand, and I think the general population in general, has preconceived notions on the military. If they didn't experience that themselves, or didn't have family members or friends, there's a huge gap in awareness on what the level of skills and backgrounds of military people. So I think one thing, just raising awareness on what the military can do with the individuals that it has, and it's pretty phenomenal. I mean, the military pretty much captures, I don't know, 90% of all the different functional areas out there in the labor market. So it produces all these individuals with all these skills and certifications. And I think there's just, but it's wrapped into this military veneer, and if somehow we could kind of remove that veneer and give them give exposure and what those individuals can do. It can help kind of close that gap. You're never gonna, get rid of the gap, but maybe you can just, make it small.
Yeah, entirely agreed in terms of being able to make it smaller. And again, once we get to the section of what you're doing with Oplign, I'm really excited to hear how you're doing that, because I believe you are really addressing that head on. Awesome. So we're going to do a life story. And before we kick off your life story, we're going to do a formal introduction. So Jeff Gibson served for 20 years in the Navy, 10 years of active duty as a naval diving officer, Navy SEAL, assigned to SEAL Team 1 and SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 2, and 10 years as a Navy reservist assigned to various SEAL Reserve units. Jeff is born and raised in St. Louis, has an economics degree from University of Missouri and an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis. Jeff has business development experience at 3M and 12 years of experience in defense contracting with Blackwater and Deco. Today, Jeff is the founder and COO of Oplign, a veteran-owned SaaS platform that aligns job seekers and companies to fill open positions, including helping veterans transition into the civilian workforce. Awesome, Jeff. So let's kick off with childhood. We know you grew up in St. Louis. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I actually grew up in Florissant. Literally, I'm the youngest of 4 kids. Family of 6. I grew up in like a house with less than 1,000 square footage, 1 bathroom. But my dad was a skilled tradesman. Mom, stay-at-home mom. Went to parochial school. Catholic grade school. But it was absolutely phenomenal childhood. Everything. Up in Florissant, really close to where the Missouri and the Mississippi River meet. Tons of woods, lots of water. It was like an ultimate playground for kids. Get on your bike. In summertime. 8 in the morning and come back before the sun went down. Great place to grow up. I ended up going to down to near Forest Park, St. Louis U High for high school, and that kind of opened my eyes to the rest of the world of St. Louis. We never really left Florissant until then, but I took public bus, bi-state bus from Florissant down to SLU. That kind of opened my eyes on what the rest of the world was. But that going to an all-boy private high school really kind of helped shape my life as well. Phenomenal education, rooted in in Christianity, but kind of set my life up, giving me, in my opinion, the right core values. You learn a lot about, responsibility, taking accountability. You make your own life, you create your own path, you accept challenges, you don't blame others, you just move on, kind of thing. Yeah. From there, I had to pay for own universities. My mom and dad's philosophy was, hey, we'll help you. We'll get you to the high school, a nice high school. We can learn, but then for college, it's up to you. So same with my brothers and my sister. They all went to private high schools, but then we were all on our own to pay for our own colleges. So that kind of naturally kind of drove me to go to University of Missouri. In-state tuition. Again, back then, late 80s, tuition was really affordable.
Yeah.
So would love to have gone. My dream school at the time, going from there was to go to Purdue University. I did get in, but there's no way I could have afforded that. But so then went down to Mizzou, but I was there it was either during a visit or maybe freshman orientation. The tour guide walked us by the ROTC building. I don't know if you've ever been down here. It's like castle looking building. Nestled between Greektown and the medical facility. And the tour guide said something like, "Hey, I don't know, ROTC, you have to wear a uniform once a week, and they give you money for school." Oh, definitely piqued my interest. Finish the tour, and I go back to that building. I walk in the first floor, and it's divided. Like the Navy ROTC has the first floor, and the Army and the Air Force are upstairs. So I walked into the first floor. They have this huge model of the USS Missouri battleship right there, which is really cool. And then walked into like the admin offices, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to school here this fall. Would love to know more." And then I kind of got the ball rolling on ROTC. I didn't even go upstairs. So that turned out probably being one of my best decisions ever. Didn't know it. I'll have to say first was marrying my wife, but it could be depending on the time. And yeah, that kind of really set me on a path to basically seeing the world. So I somehow in my life, I kind of feel like I stumbled into that. It was serendipity or luck or divine intervention. I don't know, but that really kind of put me on a trajectory that was different than if I never did that. And I went through school and stayed maybe in the Midwest area and all that. I would have never have done any of the things that I've done.
Right.
So
was military on your radar before that point?
It really wasn't. Even
Wow.
at school, there was a couple guys who were talking about ROTC scholarships. We had one of my classmates went to West Point, really good football player, who's actually a judge now in St. Louis. But it wasn't. I don't know. It just wasn't in my vernacular at all.
Yeah.
Maybe, and I don't know. I would have, I had nothing against it or for it, but it's just, really wasn't, there. My dad was in the Navy during the Korean War. He got drafted into the Navy and was a storekeeper. His grandfather, who died a long, long time ago before we were even born, he was in the Navy as well, and he was a gunner's mate. So, and it wasn't, there was no like, oh, my dad was in the Navy, my grandpa, I'm going to do that. It was just kind of circumstances kind of dictated my decision. So, but again, like I said, probably the number one choice that I've made that really had a tremendous positive impact in my life.
Yeah, and I guess it sounds like, right, also at that point, it wasn't necessarily that your peers were involved either. You were just simply on a tour, and that was an advantageous thing to do.
No, and then I was also in fraternity, classic Mizzou experience, tremendous, and then my freshman year, I'm pledging in the fraternity, but I still had to wear a uniform once a week, and I I kept my uniforms off campus at some friend's house, so I would leave campus, put my uniform on, and go to class, and then that lasted a few weeks until one of the other active brothers saw me, and he's like, "What the?" We had no idea, so they made me bring my uniforms on, but again, you're young, you're kind of insecure about everything, so they really embraced it. They thought it was pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah.
So that was that was one of my learning lessons in life.
So what was signing up like, if you remember, like what direction were you kind of geared toward? Obviously you said Navy, or any other details around that, or it was simply like, okay, you go through the ROTC program and at some point you decide kind of specifics?
Yeah, about maybe about halfway through school, your sophomore year, well, actually every summer you go off and do like a 4-week they called it a midshipman cruise. Or one summer you go on a ship for 4 weeks, and learn ship life, so which is phenomenal. So I sent off to San Diego, got put on a destroyer. But that was the first time I was ever in an airplane. Going out to California, unbelievable. Next summer, going to Pensacola, you're hanging out with all the flight school aviation people, and then you end up going to the, spending a week with the Marines, a week on a submarine. It's a phenomenal kind of awareness program. So based on all those trips, you start to shape and decide, hey, where do I want to go when I graduate? Because that was another very attractive thing of joining the Marine Navy ROTC was, and when I graduate, you get commissioned and you have a job. I was just like, oh man, that's amazing. It's wow, okay,
Yeah.
this is great. Why wouldn't I not want to do this?
Yeah, agreed. It's an unbelievable program, and I always am interested in how people kind of hear about it and end up signing up for it. And
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of times it's kind of a story similar to yours, where they're on on a school campus one way or the other, and see whether it be other ROTC enlistees in uniform on campus, or they see the building itself. It's interesting that there's no or at least I haven't heard one yet, a story where someone was actually aware of it kind of before college and signed up earlier on.
yeah. There's always a couple of people in my class at Navy and Mizzou, the ROTC class, that they were pretty gung ho and knew what they wanted to do. Like one guy's like, I'm gonna be a nuclear powered trained submarine officer. I'm like, well, how do you even know what that is? But they did, yeah. So
Yeah, that's great.
I was heading toward definitely flight school. My eyes were fine, physical. Highly likely. I took the aptitude test and did fine until my last summer for my senior year. Back out to San Diego, and then I was paired up with another midshipman from Texas A&M, and he had a brother who was actually already in, but he was over at the SEAL training base in Coronado. And he's like, hey, you want to go over and see that? I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Just I was getting off the ship. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. So we went over there, and that place blew my mind. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. This is unbelievable. I really hardly knew anything about it. I had another, classmate who gave me an introduction into it. He swam for University of Missouri, and he already, knew he was going to do that, but it didn't even really pique my interest until I went over there and just saw the training firsthand. We got a tour of all the facilities. We got to see the classes actually, going through training, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I want to do this, So I go back to so now the summer's over. It's my senior year, and at that time in the fall, you have to give them your three choices on what you want to do. So before that trip, it was aviation and and nothing at all. And then now this time it was like, well, I want to be a SEAL, or aviation. And they're like, hey, you can't put aviation as a second choice. And I'm like, what? Okay. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll be a SEAL, then a diver, and then other. And other, you just, who knows. So, and then, halfway through your spring semester, before you graduate, they come back. All right, here's all your assignments. Like, all right, you guys are going to a ship. You guys are going to submarine. You guys are going to flight school. And at Gibson, you're going to Navy dive school. I'm like, okay, all right, that sounds cool. I'm still, kind of a little disappointed I did not get SEAL training right away. But I'm like, all right, so, and I end up at Navy dive school, which was phenomenal. Learning about all these, learning how to dive. Everything from like scuba to hard hat diving to mixed gas, and learning how to underwater weld and underwater cutting. The school in Panama City Beach actually has a ship that's in the harbor that they sink, and then part of the class is to dive on it and patch all these holes, and then you get these pumps and you pump all the water out, and the ship races.
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing. It was
Wow.
phenomenal. Training. So I was just completely happy, challenged. I kind of felt special because it's unique. It was very competitive course to get into. And then you get your assignment to ships, and then I get assigned to a ship out of Groton, Connecticut called the USS Sunbird. That's a submarine rescue ship. It has multiple recompression chambers on board, and it has this big, huge submarine rescue bell on the fantail of the ship. So it's ideally, if or unfortunately, if a submarine went down, we would be the ship that would respond and put this bell over the submarine and rescue everybody inside. That was basically our mission.
Wow, amazing. Going a step back though.
Oh yeah, sorry.
At the yeah, no problem. No problem. At that time, Was it even an option to go directly into SEAL training?
Um, it was, but very, very, very super competitive.
Mm.
So on average, the Navy only assigns like 25 to 30 new officers into the SEAL program a year.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
Because of the officer dynamic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the Naval Academy gets 25 of those
Mm.
automatically, and then the rest either five. Yeah, that's a good question because that'll come in later. 5 to 10 of those will go to OCS, Officer Candidate School,
Mm-hmm.
or ROTC,
Right.
So, but it's a function of how many billets they have available.
Right.
So, I would say every year the Navy ROTC program countrywide gets anywhere from 2 to 5 billets a year.
Yeah. Wow.
Into the program.
Yeah. And then before getting into, the dive mission set trade, did you do any specific like swim training, or you just went straight into it?
Yeah, I kind of went straight into it, but I did. A really good friend of mine, in the summers that we'd stayed down in Columbia, we lifeguarded it. There's a recreational lake down there, and then a couple pools. So we were on the lifeguard team that would do all those. But the head lifeguard guy, got very driven, physical fitness guy. He would make us show up an hour early and work out. So that was, at the time, like, this is a bunch of crap, but kind of really helped me in the long run.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah.
I can't imagine, going from kind of no swimming in general. I was also living in Missouri, right? Kind of landlocked, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And then going into becoming a diving officer. That's a pretty extreme difference of world.
There's some points there. And physically, good athlete, very physically fit, scored perfect fitness test scores every semester. It was only a couple of us that did that, so I met all that criteria.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
got it. Yeah. so in starting dive school, what was that like? Like what kind of, I guess one is, what was that pipeline to being assigned to that ship? And also what was the dynamic between being an officer, and I'm guessing there were others there that were not officers.
Yeah. So what's unique about so in my class, there's probably 4 or 5 officer, they call it basic diving officer class. Mm-hmm. There was 13 of us, which, 9 were Naval Academy guys. I think 4 were ROTC and 1 was like an OCS. So this is like the first time you're starting to like really, blend in with the different, officer development mm-hmm. programs. Naval Academy and OCS. So, and I always struggled with like. I went to a state school that was kind of a really good time, and didn't have all the extracurricular requirements that the Naval Academy people are, which is really, really strenuous and mm-hmm. Difficult to get into and all that. But we're at the same place that we took different paths, but now we're at the same location, going through the same training. So it just kind of blew my mind. Like, God, this is kind of weird that, but you start to blend in, and there is kind of this this collective benefit of having these different backgrounds and different mm-hmm. exposures and all that. So I learned a lot from those Naval Academy guys, and I think the Naval Academy guys are like, wow, these non-Naval Academy guys are not jerks, they're pretty nice, and it's just kind of a way, a kind of mix, and that theme is kind of, I think, important too throughout the Navy. You'll see it, but it was officer only. Mm-hmm. There was, in parallel, there was enlisted classes, guys going through, second class diving school, which is just kind of hard hat. Then there was like first class diving school, which is diving and the salvage. And then eventually, officers who were going to those specialty ships, like they had mixed gas, helium, oxygen, mm-hmm. and Hilux and all that kind of stuff. We would blend in with the other enlisted divers who were going to that class, so we would start working with them as well. So, and that program can last anywhere from 5 to 9 months, depending on which ship you're going to. Mm-hmm. So, So like you could go to just a regular salvage ship that was like had specialty in towing and and recovery, but had divers on board. Again, mine was a submarine rescue, and there's a couple of Navy deep submarine, deep surface diving research stuff that divers would go to as well. So,
yeah. So yeah, fascinating. All of that's new, like completely new to me. So I'm really intrigued, and interested. So like when you finish that training cycle and you get to your ship, what's like an example, I don't know, mission set that you would like in theory try to accomplish, if there's an issue with the submarine. In my mind, it's like a submarine will be way deeper than someone could dive, and what would a person do? So like I'm curious what that means.
Yeah. So if I had a picture of the ship, I'd show it. So basically, let's say the submarine's in like 200 feet of water, sitting on the bottom. They're obviously not deep enough to implode or anything, but you have some type of communications with them, or they're down. So the ship would do something called a 4-point buoy anchoring system. So we would drop these huge buoys like in a square around the sub on the bottom, and then we would have all the chains, and we would position ourselves, and we would be tied to that over that submarine, and then we can maneuver ourselves directly over the submarine, and then take a big crane that's on the ship and take this diving bell and move it to the side and lower it right down onto a hatch, and then it's on the hatch. You blow all the water out, and then now you have the ability to open up the diving bell's hatch and open up the submarine's hatch and rescue people. So
yeah,
it had pretty deep. It was used a couple times in real life. So it's a proven mission set. But very kind of archaic, very. There's a really good book out there called Mud, Muscles, and Miracles. It all talks about the salvage Navy, of them starting with like they're in Pearl Harbor, salvaging all the ships that got damaged and sunk in the harbor, pulling boats off of, that ran aground, all this kind of stuff. But it's pretty dirty Navy, but kind of high, job, but highly technical. And then another job that we had was the Navy used to have this nuclear powered research vessel, that would nuclear, obviously nuclear powered, but not as big as a normal submarine, had all this scientific equipment on board. So the ship that I was assigned to, one of their primary roles was to tow that ship up into the North Atlantic or over to the Mediterranean and drop the thing off, and then wait for it to come back, and we would tow it back to wherever it was. It didn't have the resources on the legs to go on its own, so we would have to, we'd be like the surface support ship of that on that research vessel.
Yeah, very interesting.
Hopefully whoever's listening to this, you can get on Wikipedia and type in NR1. That'll pretty interesting, mission set itself. And then the third mission that we did, we were this, because we had these 2 recompression chambers on board. We'd come down here we were on a Groton, Connecticut, but we would come down to Virginia or down to Puerto Rico and support SEAL training operations off of submarines. And we would be, again, the surface support ship, but we had the recompression chambers, and the SEALs were locking in and out of submarines, and, a lot of diving going on. And, so we were just there, kind of support. So
was that exposure kind of the reignition to your?
It was exactly the reignition.
Okay.
Yeah, so now I get to a ship, and I kind of realize, really, again, as an officer, so I was the token diving officer on board, but there's a master diver and probably about 12 to 15 divers, but and we wouldn't dive all the time. We'd only, dive, probably 2 or 3 times a quarter, but the rest of the time you're basically just a regular surface warfare officer on the ship, doing, standing watches, maintenance, doing all the, roles and responsibilities that a junior officer on board a ship would do. And I'm just like, oh, and then all of a sudden I'm like, man, that aviation, career might have been, different, but it was still, again, but in my mind, completely happy. One, I made it through school. I got commissioned. Now I'm in the Navy. I'm an officer. I'm like, I've already outran my, expected potential and, my
Totally. Yeah.
I would, even if I started, if I never really started complaining, but I would catch myself going, "Hey, tap the brakes, man. You're in a pretty good spot."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But like as you said, we started to do some of these submarine support training missions for the SEALs off of Virginia, and I see these guys come on board, all their gear and equipment, and I was just like, oh man, I really want to do that. So I just started talking to them, and like, hey, dude, you can transfer. Like once you get qualified on board this ship, you can go. And I'm like, really? And like, yeah, So we had the commanding officer, SEAL Team 8. His teams were on and off, so I got to meet him. Commanding officer, SEAL Team 2. And I'm like, yeah, they kind of encouraged me to do it, and then I kind of at that point kind of learned the way to navigate the system. Before, at ROTC, I took some test scores and they threw a packet together and sent it off into the blind. These guys told me like, oh no, you have to kind of work the system. You got to make sure they know who you are. You need to get some letters of recommendations. You need to, max out on, make sure you do the absolute best on any physical fitness test that you take. You got to do the SEAL interview, all that kind of stuff. So they kind of, really gave me the inside scoop on, how to do the transfer. So I started to put the package together. A guy out of Stamford, Connecticut, a retired SEAL, linked up with him, and he was kind of known to help, college kids and enlisted to get into the SEAL program, kind of like, prep them and everything. Started working with him, and then he introduced me to a individual, like a kind of a legendary SEAL out of who lives in New London, Connecticut. So I met with him, a couple times, and that guy did my interview for me, and then I had a couple of recommendations, and then instead of just mailing it in, I actually, took leave off the ship and I hand delivered my, application to DC. Flew to DC. I walk in but not ironically, but comically, the diving officer detailer and the SEAL officer detailer sit right next to each other in DC at the Pentagon. and I walk in, and the SEAL officer's detail, he's not there yet, but the other one there, and the administrative person there's like, oh, are you here to see him? I'm like, she saw my Navy dive pen. I'm like, oh no, I'm waiting for the other guy. And there's just kind of awkward silence. I'm like, so the guy shows up, he grabs my package, he's like, oh, what's this? Like, hey, I want to transfer from diving community to the SEAL community. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. I think it was summertime. He's like, yeah, we'll look at those in August and we'll let you know in October. And then he grabs this box from underneath his desk, and it's full, it's like a 2x2 box, and it's 3/4 full, and he just tosses it in there and it pushes it back under the desk. And I'm like, is there anything else I need to do? And he's like, nope. And that was the extent of it. I'm like, and I'm walking out of there going, shit, man, should I have done something else? Should I,
right. Right. I would not feel very confident walking out of that.
Yeah, no, it was, but in October, got the call and said, hey,
amazing.
You got to be out here December 1st. I'm like, yeah, all right.
Awesome.
So
awesome. And doing that whole, creating that package process, getting those recommendations, so on and so forth. I feel like that's not something you could have done while in, university still, is it?
No. Well, I think, if not in my position,
right.
I would have never known,
right.
But maybe some of these other programs who, knew somebody, or maybe who had a classmate ahead of them, kind of, if I would have asked, but Missouri, even the Missouri Navy ROTC administrative office, like, yeah, we don't all, we never have anybody from here do that,
Yeah.
So he goes, yeah, I don't know, so, but if, if someone from, maybe, like Notre Dame has a lot of people, do like all these some of these programs maybe had more awareness on, what to do. But
do you think maybe now it's a little different just because of like access to information?
yeah,
Yeah.
completely. I mean, the SEAL, the awareness of SEALs and who they are is,
Right.
1,000 times more,
Right.
Back in, 1990, whatever, no one like, what is that?
Yeah.
Frogman, like all that. And like, oh, okay. Wow. How do you do, that kind of thing. But now it's funny. Me and some of my colleagues, guys who are SEALs with, we like, there's no way we all would have made it into the program, much less, all the challenges getting through it. It's just, it's so competitive and, but, and it's just like anything, even, some of the schools that were maybe easy to get into, 30 years ago are, very competitive as well,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, certainly a lot has changed. So
Yeah.
you put in that package, you're basically, how long were you waiting to hear back from them? It was like 2 months or 3 months?
A few months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was summer, early summer when I dropped it off, and I found out in October,
Okay. Yeah.
so. And
Awesome.
and if I didn't get it, I mean, so now in the Navy diving officer career, that's a point where you decide, like, do I go to Navy EOD school? So now you have your deflection on, or you stay in the diving community and kind of continue on being the, a salvage diver, types. And like, well, I would have gone to EOD's, school.
So would that have been a re-enlistment?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, my commitment 4 years, was the Navy ROTC commitment, and then I would have been, about the time of, that was leaving that ship, I would have been right there at the 4-year mark. Yeah.
Okay. So you were already thinking of re-enlisting anyhow, and it was just a matter of what direction you were going to be able to take?
I don't know. I was kind of at that point as well. Again, growing up and living in the Midwest my whole life, I'm in Groton, Connecticut, which is right next to Mystic, Connecticut, which is right next door to Newport Island. I kind of fell in love with, I fell in love with New England. It's a tremendous area, and, developed a friend group there. It was on my list of things to do. Like, if my fallback plan is just to stay in this area. I mean, I just loved it. It's just, the people, the topography, the New England culture is, even in the wintertime, I, really kind of fell in love with it. So I would have, at that point, say if I didn't get accepted into the SEAL program, I could have, maybe decided not to go EOD or, and I could have just stayed there and started that timeline of life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you got accepted. So what was that? What was that like for you? And kind of walk us through how that brings you into, SEAL pipeline.
Surreal, humbling, everything you think it is. So yeah, I got accepted in October. Had to be out there in December. At the time I drove this little CJ7, like a 1982 CJ7 that would, gas gauge didn't work, and if you drove it more than 2 hours, it'd overheat. So I drove that thing across, I stopped in Missouri, obviously, you see the family, parents. I drove that thing across country, out there, so I knew that I had to get gas at least, I had to stop every 2 hours. So, get gas maybe every stop, so I slowly worked my way across country, and I'd be pulled over on the side of the highway, and I would literally be doing, like, waiting for the Jeep to cool down. I'd be doing push-ups and sit-ups on the side of the road.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and then, you get out to San Diego, and it's just, very humbling. You check in, you're like, holy crap, what have I done? It, very intimidating. You end up, SEAL training is divided in these three major phases, like, physical, like the physical fitness phase, conditioning phase, basically, dive phase, and then land warfare phase, land warfare and demolition phase. But the worst part is something called fourth phase, which is that's the time, like, where you're waiting to class up, so you check in, and Monday morning you show up to this thing called fourth phase, and there's over 100 to 150 people just in that waiting to get classed up, and then start the official training. But it's like purgatory or something. It's like you're still going through all the physical fitness stuff, the training, the running, the swimming, but you're not gaining anything.
Right.
Like every day is not a gain, and it's just it's a pool of individuals who just got to the training facility, or people who've gotten hurt from previous classes and they got rolled in and they're going to start over again, or maybe they failed something, but they're a good guy and they put it back and gave them time. So you have this, like, you potentially could be in there up to 8 weeks, and that was probably the hardest time, because you're in there and you're just kind of like, everyone's an expert on what's going to happen next. Now we have to run in formation everywhere to go to go chow, to go to the obstacle course. And it was like, kind of like, what am I doing here, man? This is like, it really wasn't what I thought, but eventually, like I said, like, the new classes would start every 6 to 8 weeks. So then, a week out of the new class, everyone would take a physical fitness test again, and everyone who passed, and then you would be like, all right, you guys are starting training next week. And then that's when it's like, oh, okay, that's when it's starting. Now every day is one less day that you have to do.
Right. It's actually tracking towards something.
Yeah. It's progress,
Yeah. Give us like a hard time or a good memory from each of those phases.
Yeah. Good memories was, some of these first runs and swims, one, you're never really sure your skill sets and, where you kind of stand. But I ended up, in a, maybe top 5, top 3 of a swim or of a run, which gave me a huge confidence boost.
Sure.
Yeah. You're just, so you're questioning one, man, there's so much hype around the training, and, every class loses 75% plus of their class. And you're like, whew, why are those people gone and all that? So then, but you start to learn, like, oh, okay, of all the people who left, a third of those quit, a third got hurt, and a third failed something, so now you start to see and understand how things work and what you need to do to get through the program. And some of the instructors who are doing the training, they're probably some of the funniest people in the world. I mean, it's just like, if you can just sit back and listen to what they're saying, and not get all worried about what you're doing, it's enjoyable. It's almost, it's entertaining.
Right.
But you also you're smart enough now to kind of realize, like, they put you in the water and like, all right, you guys are not, you're not getting out till someone quits or, something, but off in the corner, you see one of the, a corpsman, a medical, the guy there taking the temperature of the water, and you're like, oh, okay, so we can only be in here for so long, so you start to,
exactly.
Yeah. Your eyes are kind of opening. So it just gave me the level of confidence, like, okay, if I understand the boundaries, and what they want, like, we're never going to satisfy any of the instructors, but they do want to see you, not, they want to see you to go all out. They don't want to see you kind of gain anything. So you just give them what they want, because and then you realize, I can only do so many push-ups in a day. I can only run so fast. I can swim so fast, but if you start not doing that, that's when they'll notice, and even their attitudes change as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Time always moves, and there's certainly an end to it, all of this. So you just gotta endure, essentially.
Yeah. And even like that first phase, conditioning phase, it literally was a Monday through Friday. So you're off on the weekends. You'd start either, 5 in the morning, but you were done by 4, or 5, and then the nights were off, and then you kind of realize, okay, whenever I'm off, I need to be sleeping or resting or eating, or, you see some of these guys, younger kids be like, they'd go out at night down in San Diego or on the weekends at Tijuana. And we'd be like, guys, stop doing that, man. It'll catch up with you. And, yeah. Sure enough.
Right. Yeah. Naturally so. Where was it separate for officers? Like, were you entirely on a different track?
No. Yeah. That's good. That's a huge point. Yeah. You are in, and that was part of that in the that fourth phase. You're all one big group. There's one officer, the senior officer in your class, is the leader, but the rest of us are all grouped in with our, with the enlisted guys, so, which is, like super unique, I think, to most, Navy schools and probably most military schools. There is no separation.
Right.
Then you're subdivided into these boat crews. So then the officers would, be be the leader of that boat crew. But in my class, we started with, we had like 125 net fourth phase, only 86 of those classed up. And then out of that 86, 22 finished completely. Of course, we did have like 7 people rolled into our class from previous classes that were waiting for us to catch up. But we had 6 officers start, and we picked up 2 more, I believe. So yeah, but it's completely blended. And then the instructors expect you to lead from the front. You can't hide. But, which is funny that some of the best advice they give to new bud students is, hey man, just don't be seen or heard. Kind of hide among the masses. Don't be the top guys, don't be the bottom guys, and but just for the first few weeks, and then once like the chaos and the noise settles down, then it's on there. But
and did you enter this knowing anything, like, for example, Hell Week or phases?
Yeah, only because now, again, my education program so much more, because I was talking because of us when I was a diver supporting the SEALs. So
I see.
So I totally understood it now. So which kind of goes back, like I don't, so I was completely prepared, physically and mentally. I knew what I was getting into. I already, even I had a picture of my old Navy diving ship in my room hung up. I'm like, so I called that the ghost of Navy past. It's like, man, be careful. If you, otherwise that's what you're, you could end up back there,
Yeah.
But if I would have went straight from college into the program without that knowledge, it would have been, 10 times harder for me, I think.
Sure.
And who knows what would happen. I mean,
right.
Either injury or, a mental break, mentally broken, and quit. I don't know. So I would have loved to have gone straight in, but, maybe it was better for me to take that little detour.
Sure.
And I matured and, and a better understanding of what I was getting into.
Yeah. If you were able to recognize that mindset you mentioned in terms of, okay, there's an end to this, you just got to endure.
Oh.
That to me, that sounds like you were matured when you were going through that process, which absolutely is helpful in getting through it. So there's a little hint there, but
delayed satisfaction, the ultimate, mindset.
Yeah. So, and in diving phase, was that essentially like all things you already knew because of, your diving officer course, or was it different?
It was technically the same, but I mean, it was like different dive rigs, So, the SEALs completely use like the pure oxygen rebreather with the soda sorbent and all that. We divers don't use that. They don't really need to hide their bubbles at all. The one thing that was pretty much the same was, the thing they call like pool, comp, I don't know what it stands for. But it's when you're just circling the bottom of a pool, and an instructor will go down and just kind of like tear all your stuff up. You got to put yourself together, So that, and in my opinion, that was relatively the same. I mean, different dive rig, but there'd be, all right, this hit's supposed to simulate you getting tumbled around in the surf zone. This one next one's a little bit harder of a dive buddy who panics and he's scraping at your stuff, and this one is, everything is just complete chaos. You're completely screwed. Everything is in a knot. You can't uncover. Can you put it? Can do it again. So, it was relatively not that challenging. But then the whole dive phase. Now you've gone through a whole 10 weeks of conditioning phase, right? So now you're stronger and more, so now you even have, it's kind of the same, but now you have diving, and then there's also all the diving technical, dive medicine, diving physics and all that you have to learn as well, which is pretty much became a tutor for all the, the guys who they were first getting introduced to it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear that. Like I would, hope to hear exactly what you just said. Whereas if you specialized in that, carryover is great. So it sounds like, go ahead.
Yeah. One time, after one evolution, like, in a pool, I can't remember what it was, but like the head medical diving corpsman at the SEAL training community came up to me. He's like, hey, pulled me aside. It's like, hey, I want you to act like you got a diving, accident, like, act like you got bit, basically, because what he was doing, he was going to test the instructors and the medical response team's ability to do that, so at the end of the diving evolution, we're all kind of sitting there waiting, you get released, and and then like, all right, you guys are good to go, beat it, so I kind of stand up and kind of act like I'm dizzy and kind of fall down, and the head instructor's over here, he's looking at, he's starting to give me kind of a neurological exam, and I kind of know, like, all right, I know what he's looking for, so I twitching my eyes, I'm all this kind of stuff. So that's the alert. So then they go, all right, and the chamber, so then now they call the ambulance, the SEAL training ambulance comes, picks me up, and we go all the way up to the Navy SEAL compound recompression chamber, and they put me in and go all the way down to 60 feet to start like a treatment table on me. And, but my whole class has no idea. They're like, oh, Jesus, Gibson, what the hell? And then and once we got to 60 feet in the chamber, that head corpsman guy's like, all right, drill's complete. He's fine. That was just an exercise for you guys, So I was like, oh, cool. They used me as as the guinea pig because they knew, but it was.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's neat. So it sounds like you went through the entire pipeline straight. Is that correct?
Yeah, straight through. Yeah.
Awesome. So, like, I guess in hindsight, what kind of advice would you give to, if anyone else who is aspiring to become a SEAL, what kind of advice in terms of getting through straight would you give?
Like one day at a time. So many good, capable individuals got so wrapped up and like, oh my gosh, this is going to go on for another 5 months. I can't do that. I'm like, man, just be happy that you're here. Just change your mindset. It could be worse. No matter what, you fought to be here. So make it worth your time and effort.
Yeah. So yeah, totally agree. I really like the approach of first of all, compartmentalize, so one day at a time, and then secondly, it always could be worse. I think those are kind of lighthearted ways to shift your mindset. Awesome. So you get to the end of training. Walk us through kind of what happens next.
Yeah. So toward the third year, now you're in third phase, and now that's the really the kind of the journey of the SEAL stuff, because now you're doing weapons, you're doing demolition, and you all go out to San Clemente Island, phenomenal facility out there. where, you have all the water and all the demolition fields and the ranges out there. It's amazing, but that's 8 weeks long, I think it is. But after that, you pretty much graduate. But during that phase, you start to put in your dream list, like, hey, I want to be an East Coast SEAL, a West Coast SEAL, or I want to go to this team. So you put that in. So by the time you graduate, you know which SEAL team you're going to. So my team was SEAL Team 1. So there was like 4 of us that went to SEAL Team
1. How would you know, like, what helps you understand where you're trying to go?
Yeah, I think you probably don't. Most guys had preferences, like, oh man, I really want to go to West Coast or East Coast.
Yeah.
But also at the time, they were geographically mission focused. So all the West Coast teams were Asia Pacific and Central Asia. Where the East Coast teams were South America and then Europe and and Africa. So guys had preferences.
Sure.
And then some of the guys spoke languages, that kind of drove, if they wanted to do that. Yeah.
Fair enough.
One of the guys on my team, Hispanic surname, he did not want to go to the SEAL Team 4, which is kind of the Central America, South America team. And they kept saying, they're like, you know Spanish? He's like, I don't know any Spanish. But he was fluent. I mean, it was just like, but he wanted
That's
to go.
Hilarious.
He wanted to ski with the Norwegians and
Swedes.
Winter warfare stuff.
Wanted to do something different for him.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, awesome. So, like, what was that process like for you? Did you have a preference, or you just wrote down whatever?
West Coast, I think, and then at the time now, after Hell Week, and I knew I was going to, make it. I asked my wife to marry her, So, and then in my mind, I'm like, it'd be a great place for her to be, So I'm like, hey, yeah, we're going to get married, and now you're going to live in Coronado, California. So, because I knew I was going to be gone all the time, So I'm like, West Coast would be great. And again, coming from the Midwest, California, San Diego, it's unbelievable. So I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So you get assigned SEAL Team 1, you go there, and now even though you graduated and 6 months of basic SEAL training, now you still have, once you get to the team, now you have another 6 months of kind of probationary time where you go through some advanced training, before you even get assigned into a platoon, and that's kind of like you're being watched and judged, and and then if you pass all those skill sets, then you get your SEAL pin, and now you're in a SEAL platoon.
So what was that? Yeah, sorry,
guys. Yeah, I was gonna say a couple guys just were like, hey, you're out of here, or you're not. We don't feel safe with you. We've taught you repeatedly how to shoot, move, and communicate, and you keep failing. You're not an asset to the team. So you can either go away for 6 months and come back, or so it's pretty stressful. I mean, it's highly likely you're going to survive it because of what you've already done, but it's still do that. But then once you're done with that, then you're in a SEAL platoon.
Yeah. Still test mode all the way up until then, and that's pretty rough to to have an issue at that point and not make it through. So when you get to your team, actually before I even ask this, getting your finishing training completely, getting your pin, what was that feeling like for you?
I'll say that again. Sorry, but just broke up on the.
Yeah, no worries. So I was asking, when that moment that you got your pin and you were completely done, you were assigned to your team. What was that feeling? What was that moment like for you?
Surreal, awesome. You're like, oh yeah, wow, what a journey.
Yeah.
You can't believe you're there, but then again, it go in your mind, gosh, that went so fast. But yet, man, when you start thinking about it, how long it took, and all the challenges, and good friends you made who didn't make it, but very accomplished, and now, and in my mind too, now I'm in the Navy, I have two warfare specialties now. I got the special operations diving warfare specialty pin. Now I have the special warfare pin. I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
But yet, really haven't felt like I've done that much. But yeah, it's huge, a big day.
It's pretty amazing to have thought again in this to that point in your story to have just kind of stumbled across a ROTC building randomly on a campus tour to then getting a pin after kind of not knowing anything and being an officer in a SEAL team. That's an amazing journey.
It is, and it's funny. I've told this story a handful of times. Where I'd had a couple of these, what I call "how did I get here" moments.
Yeah.
And I'd start off like, man, I'm a knucklehead kid that lived in, north of St. Louis, and now I'm here, like what, what in the world?
Totally. Yeah. It's amazing. So, you get to your SEAL team. How does now this part I'm also really intrigued about is like how the, I guess, integration, I'll call it, works, get into a team and becoming an officer, I guess, really without having experience with that team. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so it's, again, I've been out for a while now, obviously. And, but at the time, each SEAL platoon had like 16 members, 2 officers, a chief, like a E7 to E9 type person, like a first class, like an E6, and then, the rest of the team, so as a new officer, you're the number 2 officer in the platoon, so you're, you have the lieutenant is, this obviously the senior guy, and then someone who's already done at least 1 or maybe 2 platoons. So he's and now you have, and then the chief is probably easily have done 4+ platoons, and he's the gray back. He's the guy with the most experience, and and the leader. So part of his job is to make sure the lieutenant doesn't screw up, and also help the new guy, the new officer, on how to be a good platoon OIC later on, kind of thing. So it's a pretty good dynamic, in my opinion. Great dynamic. And then within the platoon, everyone's kind of assigned certain mission sets. So you'll have like the head parachute guy, who's our air ops guy, who's supposed to make sure all the parachutes are working order, all the the fast rope lines, and climbing gear, and all that. And you'll have a diving petty officer who's in charge of all the diving equipment, the weapons, and then communications and intel. So they're all kind of functionally divided, and the leads, but then everyone else is kind of cross-trained in all those different kind of functions. Very small but highly capable unit of individuals who go through. You all get assigned and start training, and back then normally you'd have a whole year workup, and then you would deploy, and once you're done with that, you would deploy for 6 months. So it was like that was pretty much the deployment cycle. And then that whole year workup, you'd go, you do jungle training, maybe in Panama or Puerto Rico, then you do winter warfare training up in Alaska, then you do desert training in, Southern California, or swamp training, Louisiana or Arkansas, all these different places, but you're, using all that gear, getting used to it, and parachute training, diving, all that. So it's, it was new, but I was just completely impressed on how well-oiled machine it was on training individuals, and cross-training everybody. And you had a training cell of a bunch of really experienced SEALs who were responsible for training you. And at the end of that workup, you had something at the time called an operational readiness exam, where they would give you a mission set, and you would go and do it, and you'd be getting graded the whole time. And then then someone would certify you, like, yep, this platoon has met all the requirements, and they're both operationally and material ready to deploy. So that, in my mind, that really was like, all that whole year workup is like, man, this is like buds, like the basic SEAL training, you're like, wow, that was really basic, because now you're doing all this other incredible stuff,
Yeah.
advanced tactics and stuff. You're just like, whoa, man, this is really, amazing, type
Yeah.
stuff. So it all really starts to kind of make sense and starts to gel.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And then you also realize how really simple and or easy the beginning was. It was just a matter of breaking into that mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. So walk us through kind of what that was like in terms of, all right, so now you're an officer in your SEAL team. What's the workup? What's the deployment? Kind of how's it?
Yeah, just kind of like kind of just what I went through. Like it's well planned out. You're hitting all the different functional requirements that that fall down all the way from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're like, hey, if there's a war, if a combatant commander is going to fight a war, let's say he wants so many Navy ships, he wants so many tank brigades, he wants this, he wants a number of SEAL teams, and then under each one of those, there are these mission sets that you have to meet. So that's what drives that whole training pipeline. So your job as the officer is one, to kind of lead the team, through all those training evolutions, but being able to, be confident that you can do them, because once you deploy, you are reporting to one of those, combatant commanders, like a CENTCOM guy or a Pacific Command, guy, and you'll highly potentially be in front of him or his direct staff saying, yeah, we can parachute at night into the water, rendezvous with these boats, and we can board this ship, and you got to be able to do it, articulate that correctly, and then confidently be able to do it. I totally remember being on board getting flown out from, we were on the Korean Peninsula, being flown out from Korea to an aircraft carrier that was sitting in the Yellow Sea to potentially board a ship that was going into the North Korea. So when we flew out there, first thing we do is go down to the briefing room, and then I'm briefing a 3-star on how we intend to board this ship, and everything. So it's just, you're like, this is this is so unbelievable,
Yeah.
But
that was wild.
But the subtext of all this too, you're starting, not only are you supposed to kind of be the leader of that platoon, but you also got to start, fostering these relationships with your team. You got to earn their trust. You have to be competent in yourself. You have to be able to, keep up on the runs, take the long shot, do the push-ups and stuff, do all that, so it's a pretty heavy task, but you're also prepared for it, and I also think, being able to interact and, with the whole team, with, kind of being able to understand the dynamic between officers and enlisted, it's a dance. It doesn't, it doesn't happen automatically. You got to earn their trust, and they have to perform as well. It's a two-way street. 9 out of 10 times it's never a problem, because they understand what your role is as an officer. Because if something goes bad or wrong, you're responsible. But yet you got to have this kind of close interaction together to operate in some of the missions that we do. So it's amazing, actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a very complex and dynamic role to be in, and earning trust is absolutely critical, of course. So walk us through what your first deployment was.
Yeah, so it was a SEAL Team 1. So we did a Westpac, Western Pacific deployment. We were staged at Guam, there for 6 months. And then, throughout that 6 months, we had kind of bilateral training mission events scheduled with like Koreans, Thai SEALs, Singapore, and Australia. But when we got there, North Korea kind of flares up and comes down, flares up. It's just an endless cycle. There North Korea was getting a little froggy, and so we ended up spending a lot of time in South Korea. But so you would maybe spend a few weeks in South Korea doing some bilateral operations with the South Korean Royal Korean Marines. It could be, again, maybe practicing shipboarding or up on the DMZ, identifying tunnel entrances, all this kind of weird, bizarre stuff. Then there'll be some of these, multinational exercises. Like we were in Thailand. There's a huge exercise every year called Cold Gold. So we were in Thailand for probably 3 to 4 weeks. Working side by side with the Thai SEALs. Which have actually, the Thais every year send about a handful of individuals through the Navy's SEAL training in Coronado. So you get to see them. And then so it's 6 months of that, but then you are attached to the combatant commander in that area, and if anything happens, you're on tap to kind of do that.
So what is it like working with those cultures, and also, I mean, I'm guessing they all knew English, but it's obviously very different languages. Like how was communications with them in general?
Yeah, I would say with the Koreans, big language gap. You really need a translator. With the Thais, phenomenal English.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was really impressed. Singapore, really good English as well. Who else? Obviously the Australians, they're really good English.
Right.
But the Korean was obviously, that was a little bit challenging, but
And when does so you go through that enlistment, you get back home stateside. Where does the switch between SEAL Team 1 and Team 2 occur?
Yeah. So so you do one deployment cycle at the team, and now you're like, now you say, hey, it's time for you to go to a different team, because as an enlisted individual, you could probably stay at a single team for as long as you want, or maybe up to 10 years or something. For the officers, they want you to go to different teams. So now at that time, there really wasn't anything operationally going on in the Pacific at the time. So I really wanted to get to the East Coast, because there was, the Bosnian War was going on, and there's always things going on in Africa, so. And then, from my colleagues, I'm like, oh man, those guys are getting to do things that I'm not, So, so now I'm back again to the, calling the officer, SEAL officer detailer, and I'm like, hey, he goes, hey, I can get you to SEAL Team 5 or 3, because you stay right there, you just move down the street. Or I'm like, oh, I really want to get to the East Coast. He's like, well, I can get you to SEAL Team 2. Which is like the Northern Europe, kind of team. They pre-stage in Stuttgart, Germany, and all that. Like, that sounds phenomenal. He goes, but when you get there, you might have to wait up to a year and a half to get into a deployment cycle. I'm like, oh, what? Because, or I do have a position open up for this SEAL delivery vehicle team, and 2 in Virginia. And I'm like, And I knew that team, because when I was back in the diver on board the USS Sunbird, we supported those guys. Those guys. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Because basically what they have is these underwater submersibles that you drive on and off submarines and go do God's work. And that. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So they sent me to a STV driving school, and then I think, then I ended up out here in Virginia Beach. But that's it's a little bit more technical, completely different kind of mission set than a traditional SEAL team. Really, because you get paired up with a submarine. That submarine was out of Groton, Connecticut as well, and that submarine has this thing called a dry dock shelter. It's almost like a garage that gets bolted on the top of the submarine, and you can see pictures of it. But if you Wikipedia, whatever, type in dry dock shelter, and you'll see these submarines on the surface has the normal sail, that has this huge like looking, you know, garage on the back, and that's where the submarine launches this little submersible out there. But that turned out to be probably really rewarding operational tour. Only because one, new skill sets, new set of missions, you know, but it's almost like a national asset. There's not many of those things around,
right?
You know, and it has a whole bunch of capability that it can do. So I got exposed to all this different side of the government that really never would have gotten exposed to without through that team. All these different classified programs, all these different agencies, working with that, and yeah, it's kind of like I had one of these like, how the world did I get here moments where I remember being in the middle of somewhere waiting at like 2 a.m. To rendezvous with this huge submarine that we can drive our boat, little submersible into the thing, and going, man, what did I do? What choices in my life led me here? Kind of thing.
If I'm thinking of the same thing, I'm pretty sure I've heard other SEALs like give at least broad stories of going through training to operate one of those things, and it being a totally brutal experience. Am I tracking there?
It is. It's so primarily, again, this underwater submersible is probably like, I don't know, 20 feet long, 4 feet high, wide, battery operated. But there's a pilot and a navigator, and you pretty much drive this thing just like with a joystick. It's got depth and left, right turn and up and down. You maintain its buoyancy. But the mission profile is brutal and it's very long. So the longest dive I ever did, was like 6.5 hours. Completely underwater, breathing 6.5 hours. That's kind of on the low end. Historically, a lot of those guys have done like 8 to, I think the record is almost like 11-hour dive of the individuals, driving it. But it is so capable. I mean, basically everyone can load up into a submarine here in Norfolk, Virginia. The submarine can leave the harbor, go submerge, and go anywhere in the world and do whatever it's supposed to do and come back and surface in Virginia and pull back in, and no one would ever know. It's amazing. But you also work super closely with the submarine crew as well, because it's, they're there for you. We're there, for them. They're dropping us off, and then they're protecting us while we're out there. It's a, probably not as well known capability out there that, I got to experience. But
yeah, it sounds like that's amazing. I guess you got to really be okay with claustrophobia to be in such a role.
Everything's dark. All the dives just, you just have these, displays in front of you, cold. It is miserable. But I didn't mind diving at all either. Like some of the SEALs were like, I would never, like, one, they didn't even like the diving that we had to do in the regular SEAL, and then they're like, no, like when they heard that I was going to STV, like, are you crazy? And like, I don't mind diving. It's almost like you can't say that in SEAL team. Everyone
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like you found a good spot, not only because of the missions that you got to do and skills you got to pick up, but also you were kind of privy to that environment anyway. So that's awesome.
And kind of a full circle event too. Being in Groton,
right.
I was stationed here, and I'm back here loading up a submarine, so it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I guess overall, any, I don't know, unique experiences that you want to bring up, generally speaking, that you can bring up before we kind of close out that part of your service?
Yeah. No, just like I said, best choice ever made was walking into that Navy ROTC building, just asking like, hey, can you guys help pay for my school?
That's amazing.
I would say if I could extract any advice out of that, it was just like, if there's any, like, all I did, if I had to distill everything, how I got there, was just because I asked. I just knocked on those
Right.
doors. I do remember when I reached, that kind of that really famous SEAL that lived in the area. I remember pausing before I called him to introduce, because he was already kind of set up, but the ball was in my court to reach out and call that individual and ask to meet him. I do remember pausing and going, "Oof, hey, once I knock on this door, I got to be prepared what's going to open it up." And so, but it was just, but everything I've done, it was just because I just decided to walk in there. When I had opportunities not to, but I just did it. So that would be my advice. Like, just go knock on the door, get in there.
Yeah. Amazing. So I guess, cause this, I guess, is going to bring us to the end of your, active duty time. What was your thought process as, those 10 years were ended? Like, how did you make that decision?
Yeah. So my last duty station, I had to do a staff job. So I luckily was able to do that in London. There was a, Navy Forces Europe, the headquarters is in central London. It's a holdover from, World War II or Eisenhower's, things there. Great. But that was the departure of my time to be operational in the SEAL teams. Because once you do 2 or 3 deployment cycles as an officer, you're done. I mean, if you get to go to dev group or somewhere, you can just eke out another one maybe. But you're going to be administrative, the guy in the rear with the gear, that kind of thing. So, I wasn't against it, but I was in that Navy staff, and there was a lot of guys who were getting out, a lot of these junior officers who were, going back to business school or law school or all that, so I was just kind of like, what are they doing? Interesting. So, it kind of forced me to decide, like, hey, what do you want to do? Because now you're at a inflection point in your timeline here. So if I take on another set of orders, then, now it would make sense to stay in and do a full career in the military, or if you get out, it's something. So, and then, and I think we didn't have any kids yet. And my wife was, maybe a little anxious about having kids in the military, only because, or maybe staying in the military, because I still would be traveling a lot, so while we were in London, we made a decision like, all right, let's get out. And in my mind, the logical best transition I could probably do is probably, go back to school, get a graduate degree. And that would at least give me a buffer or a time to understand, hey, what do I want to do in the civilian market? You get exposed to, different industries, different companies, so to me, business school was kind of the best option to kind of facilitate that transition. So naturally it was an easy choice for me to go back to St. Louis, and I, went to obviously, Washington University in St. Louis. They have a great school in itself, and then has a phenomenal business school. So that's what we did. So there's, and part of me was like, like, oh man, did I quit? And that was against the nature of, rooted in me from SEAL training, like, you're quitting the Navy, or, but it was more like, life is about experiences, and if I leave now, I'm, setting myself up on another line of experiences, that would, really kind of, who knows where that would lead. And that was exciting. I kind of knew what my next 10 years would be. 10, 15 years would be in the Navy. I did not know what it was at all if I did decide to get out, and that was probably more attractive. The unknown was probably more attractive to me than staying in.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on something that, brings us to this next segment, which is that transition period. That said, you also, I don't know when you enlisted in the reserves. I don't know if it was kind of simultaneous or after. But I guess the question here is, and then, you obviously tell us, but, what was that transition period like, highlighting what you just noted as it relates to, like, am I quitting? That, like, typical kind of thought processes that go through, enlisted folk and turning into veteran life.
Yeah. So I literally, my, last active duty day was June 30th, 2000. And my first reserve day was July 1st. So I had all already lined up. So I'm like, well, it was just in my mind, it was just a way to, continue on and stay involved.
Yeah.
But then again, this is all pre 9/11, so the whole dynamic of the world was a little different.
Yeah.
So it made it easier,
Sure.
for me,
Sure. Yeah. So let's walk through that process, right? So you get back, I guess, so it means you get back to St. Louis, you start school, which is it. I'll touch on this, or, as I'm saying out loud here. How is it being in school, coming off of 10 years in the Navy and SEAL teams, probably in class with 20-year-olds?
Yeah. I did. It was pretty interesting. We did in my class. It's funny. We had 5 other military people in the class. We had 1 Navy, me, 1 Army, 1 Marine, 1 Air Force, and 1 Coast Guard. I mean, it was bizarre. I mean,
yeah.
But we also kind of reflected all our services as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Army guy, phenomenal guy, but kind of big and loud and like cheerleading guy. He's phenomenal individual, but he kind of represents the Army, which is kind of big and loud, and they're there. You always know that they're there. The Air Force guy, short of wearing a scarf around his neck, he had the Ray-Bans, and he flew 141s on the weekend. Hilarious. The Coast Guard guy knew where all the bars were and all the parties at all times. The Marine was in the reserves as well, and he would get to the school at like 6 a.m. when it opened, and he'd be there till 5. It was just kind of funny how we all manifested all the different service branches reputations into the school. But that kind of at the beginning of the program, you asked me that question about that, integrating, that gap between, understanding on military. At firsthand, you get assigned to these small groups, and then, you'd have a small group meeting at, hey, let's meet at 4 p.m., in the Bugs Bunny room, whatever. And, sure enough, one person shows up at 4:15, and that would drive me crazy.
Right.
To the point of be like, and then, I finally had to call somebody out, and I hate doing it, but I'm like, man, it's not right. He's like, you got to hold people accountable. Everyone agreed to show up at that time. Everyone, did what they had to do to get there. And then one person can, routinely shows up late, and you just got to hold them accountable, so you're like, oh, great. I'm like the older jerky military guy of the class. I'm like, yeah, screw it, man. This is for their education as well, so, but yeah, I felt a little self-conscious being like one of the old. I was not the oldest guy, definitely for sure, but I was definitely in the older, part of the group, but it only lasted a few months, and then everyone kind of, it all gets blended together.
Sure.
So
sure.
It wasn't that bad of a problem.
Mm-hmm. So like going through this process also while you're still in the reserve, what was your kind of reserve commitment?
It's kind of standard, 1 week in a month, and then summertime or sometime during the year, a 2-week active duty thing. So I think my first summer, I went back to London for 2 weeks, and fulfilled that requirement. Went back and worked the ops staff there in London. So that was pretty easy. But there is a reserve unit in St. Louis that it's like mine and shore undersea warfare or something. They have a lot of, that's a unit that would kind of go into a foreign harbor and kind of provide all the sensors, radars, and sonars just for general protection. So it was pretty smooth, easy transition. Their building is right there at the airport, kind of thing. So
I could imagine also having the fact that you're actively going to reserves, that's kind of blending you slowly but surely into like civilian life, while also having to plug into the military world. still.
It's like, yeah, it's like an attic. You don't want to cold cut them off completely. You just want to slow drip them. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you finish your MBA degree. I guess toward the end of that degree, what were you looking like? What's your thought process?
Yeah, I interned at 3M, between my first and second year up in 3M headquarters up in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. I really had no preference on industry or companies, but I think I did kind of want business development operations type. I didn't stay away from maybe I was maybe eliminating areas of that where I would go to work. So 3M was kind of perfect. They have 3M has a business development or like an MBA business development program where you go, into 3M and then have like a leadership development program where you spend different time with different parts of the company. So that felt like a perfect program because I still was unsure like where I wanted to go and all that. But the school that MBA program really did help, because it got me exposed to companies and industries that I would have not even known about, and that maybe if I was coming out of the military, I would have jumped right in, not knowing. So I think right now, what we see is about 60% of veterans who are coming out of the directly active duty going into companies usually leave that first job within a year.
Interesting.
And I think part of that is one, they just really don't have the awareness of what they're getting into.
Right.
Two, I think there's a level of not panic, but like, hey, there's a job out there. I should take that because I'm leaving. And then it takes them. They need that year to kind of figure out what they want to do, and at the end, they figure out, oh, I don't want this.
Yeah. I mean, that does make sense to me. It seems pretty logical, making that shift, which is very significant. So then it sounds like from 3M, you went into contracting, defense contracting.
Yeah. So the monkey wrench in all this was 9/11. So now I'm in school. The fall of my second year, 9/11 happens, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like I trained for war my whole life. I mean, I was in the military. I was there. I was there for, personal reasons, but yet I was there for like I really want to be part of anything that happens. Kind of thing. 9/11 happens, and I find myself on the wrong side. So now I'm on the outside looking in. And I felt like I missed prom. I'm like, oh man, like you got to be kidding me. And then the Navy was not. If there was going to be a reserve call up, mandatory call up, I would have obviously done it in a heartbeat. Navy really wasn't in that position yet to needed to do any of that. Because I knew some other branches were like, all right, this whole reserve unit or National Guard unit is going. And there's no choices. So, I went through SEAL training with a guy named Eric Prince, who was the founder of Blackwater.
Yeah.
So he called me, and he's like, hey, I've love to see what you're up to. My company's growing fast and furious. I need some competent help. I'm like, oh man, I'm fine. We just had our second baby. But he goes, why don't you come out and visit? I'm like, okay. So I go, tell my wife, like, hey, I'm going to go see Eric and, Blackwater. And she didn't say it at the time, but I think she knew, like, oh no, we're moving in.
Well, also at that time, I mean, you said he was starting, right? So like we're also thinking about it with the knowledge we have today. Like it must have been, it must have just, nobody knew what he would be able to create from that, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I go out to visit, and there's a 7,000 acre training facility just south of Virginia, North Carolina border. I drive on, there's Black Hawks flying over, there's gunfire out in the distance, occasional, it's just people are running. I'm like, what in the world is this? And not that 3M was a phenomenal company. In my third year, I was working directly with the number 2 guy of the company who eventually became the CEO.
Wow.
I was on I would fly around with him on the G5, to do, to go to other subsidiaries around the world, a phenomenal opportunity, but I'm like, man, I feel like I'm not contributing anything, and getting into defense contracting was my way to at least kind of get back into the fold, at least be part of the solution, be part of the team, and, after convincing my wife this is a good choice, within, I think I left 3M like May 1st, and by May 10th, I was in Afghanistan in Herat, Afghanistan, on the border of Iran and Afghanistan, setting up a border patrol training program for the Afghan border patrol. I'm like, oh, all right, this is now I feel like I'm doing something,
Yeah.
So, and then then I'm in Africa, obviously the Middle East a lot, back out to Paycom, now, Blackwater is growing. They're getting close to $1 billion. And then they, there's, some issues with, Blackwater politically. And then, Blackwater kind of, takes a hit, but I ended up, Blackwater really contracts, and I ended up moving over to one of the partners that I used to work with at Blackwater, and not from that company. That was that company called Deco. So I spent about 4.5 years at Blackwater, and then about another almost 9-10 years at this company called Deco that did the same thing at Blackwater, but just a lesser known name.
Right. What was your kind of deployment cycle at Blackwater?
So I was actually in charge of all the government training program, government contracts we had training foreign nationals. So I, most, obviously out of the Blackwater compound in North Carolina, but I would probably travel, 2 or 3 times a quarter to go visit the programs that we set up. Had leads, for each of those. At one time, I probably had 120 people deployed across the world supporting U.S. government on different training programs.
Wow.
Yeah. So Blackwater had an aviation group, the security group, and then the training piece. So I was in the training piece. And in between, when I was back, we were just bidding on new contracts. U.S. government contracts, to keep the pipeline going.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So then, when you shifted to Deco, that was the same kind of a role, or were you kind of doing something different?
Same thing. In fact, some of the contracts that I worked on at Blackwater were shifted over to Deco. Yeah. Yeah. So same customer, just like different. In that whole contracting world, which I really knew nothing about, is pretty interesting in itself. I mean, that's a whole podcast.
Sure.
Yeah. going forever.
Yeah, I've no doubt. So, I guess during that entire time, I think you said you were based in North Carolina, or did I hear that incorrectly?
Yeah. It's
North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah, we lived in the same house, so it's really just on the other side of in Moyock, North Carolina. That's where
Yeah. Okay. So you're based there, and then you had like you mentioned, a few times a quarter, you go visit wherever you need to, anywhere in the world. Okay.
Yeah, Afghanistan, I probably been in Afghanistan 12, 15 times,
Yeah.
Tons of Africa time. Yeah. So.
Right. So, I mean, it's like, generally speaking, was a like quote unquote typical job, in the sense that you'd travel a few times. Now, if you go to the details of the job, obviously it's very unique. Yeah, and also where you're traveling is unique, but it wasn't like a deployment cycle or anything like that. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Is that what allowed your wife to kind of buy in?
Yeah, I think so. He's like,
okay.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it was hard for her to live in like Minnesota. What a great state, great family place, but those winters are pretty hard.
Sure. Sure.
So I think, but yeah, so.
Yeah, sure. So where does, I guess there's a lot of overlap with, your reserve duty, and kind of how does that end and shift?
So when I was at 3M, I shifted reserve duty from that mobile inshore undersea warfare to Navy Great Lakes. So there is actually a SEAL reserve unit that was out of the Great Lakes.
Mm.
So that worked out pretty well. So it's maybe a 4-hour drive from the Twin Cities to where I had to go. And then it was great because that team actually would go set up like winter warfare training camps like in Upper Peninsula. So like a 2-week period to be, hey, go up to Upper Peninsula and support training active duty SEAL teams to build snow caves and telemark ski through hillsides there. So that was pretty nice. And then I was able to do my 2-week active duty requirements at SEAL commands. So out in Hawaii, out in Coronado. So that was nice. But ironically, when I shifted from Minnesota to Blackwater, so now I'm literally in one of the heartbeats of the SEAL community here in Virginia Beach. But I was so busy at Blackwater that I had to not do the active duty stuff, but just do the minimum reserve time to be considered still reserves. It's just I didn't have the time. Even though I was like right down the street from the SEAL, headquarters. So.
Right. So I guess what that was, I think if I'm understanding like the chronological order here, your reserve duties ended kind of mid defense contracting career.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. What was that kind of thought process like?
Well, I ended up at that time hitting the 20 cumulative years,
right?
And then I can go, okay, all right, I'm done. But then now, when I turn 60, I do get retirement benefits.
Yeah, awesome. So awesome. So what's really funny. I'm kind of realizing is you're even when you finished your reserve duty, you're still kind of in that trickle effect of involved, right, with the defense contracting. So getting to the end of that defense contracting, now I want to ask as like a hindsight advice, right? Transition period. Think about that, when you finish with defense contracting, and I guess start with Oplign, which I'll ask you about in a moment. What kind of hindsight advice would you give to veterans in that transition period, finish in military service, whether it be any of the three that we're talking about in your career, so active, reserve, or defense contracting, and finally kind of migrating fully into civilian life?
Yeah, I'd talk to anybody you possibly can, and ask what they're doing. Especially anybody, and I don't mean like from like mentors. Like if you know somebody who's in a certain industry, maybe a prime military guy, just go ask. Hey, why are you, why are you in this manufacturing industry? Like, why did you leave? How'd you end up here? I mean, because that's, talking about gaps again, that awareness gap is critical, and then these guys are just, again, taking jobs just because it's a job, but I think everyone would love to kind of give their advice and, insight on why they're there, and find out what their journey is as well, because then that just, equips you with, you can make a well-informed decision, and then the reserve, like I think one of the benefits of kind of maybe not cut and complete ties, if you are in the reserves, now you're interacting and creating a network of other individuals who have real jobs that are there, and it's just a great connection, and just to understand what's going on. You're slowly building your own like kind of personal network, that can kind of maybe help when you need it.
Yeah, well said. That's great. It's great advice. So going back to, I guess, kind of where we left off in terms of the back end of defense contracting, this point with DECO, how did that conclude?
So DECO ended up being sold. But also there was the genesis of Oplign started to happen. We saw a real, true problem out there, an issue, that really wasn't being addressed. So it was a great, DECO was in a transition. One of my business partners, my Oplign business partners, who I was actually at SEAL Team 1 with as well, he was already quit his kind of day job and was already working on the beginnings of Oplign. So it was just kind of the timing was almost perfect for me to shift focus and, all right, let's throw everything into the, let's all your time and effort into building Oplign. So it was just, I think, circumstance kind of driven.
Yeah, got it. So as we step into what you're doing with Oplign, I probably should have added it in the beginning, but I'll add now nonetheless. Is no, I'm also very excited to share this as our first kind of addition to the show, where it's veterans supporting veterans versus whereas we're kind of otherwise focused specifically in the built environment. That said, a really awesome organic was the word I was looking for. Organic kind of plug happened when I was interviewing a vet at Turner Construction, if I recall correctly, who I believe is working with you guys.
Yeah.
He was, we were in the process of the interview. It's not released yet. I'm going to let you know when it does. And he was just talking about programs Turner Construction is doing for and with veterans. And he starts talking about your platform. And I thought that was it. Yeah, it was just an awesome connection point that, was completely organic and, couldn't have made up. So that being said, talk to us a little bit about Oplign and what you're doing there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the idea behind Oplign, the genesis was back to defense contracting, and government contracting, how to when you bid on work and you're competing against other companies, your success is totally dependent on your ability to find the individuals that you promised the government that you would deliver, and if you win a contract, you said you would deliver these, 24 people with these skill sets, certifications, and education, and if you don't get paid, so we were very successful at Blackwater winning contracts and then on to Deco, but then often you'd win these contracts, you'd be like, hey, all right, it could be a staffing contract across embassies for, security personnel or IT personnel or healthcare, and you're on the hook to find these individuals. And sometimes you get short time leads, 30 days, 60 days to get these individuals approved by the government, and then get them into their places of employment, that you promised, so we would win these things. And then we would ask our HR department, recruiters, hey, go find these individuals and bring them to us and we'll approve them, and then, let's say if it's a security manager, for, a security gig in the Moscow embassy, let's say, they'd give us 20 resumes and it'd be like a third of them would be, financial security managers, half of them would be cyber security managers. And then there'd be some physical security. It's like, so you're like, oh, God, you'd be kidding me. So then we'd go to headhunting companies and staffing agencies, and but it always ended up being the 11th hour of all the operational guys who are running these programs, tapping into their personal networks and trying to find these individuals. They're like, God, why is it so hard to find these people? And then we kind of distilled it down to, it's like, well, the whole system is kind of archaic. It's all analog. It's all dependent on these resumes and these job descriptions and the word search. We're like, you gotta be kidding me, man. This has been going on forever. Like supply chain management is fully automated. If one little unit off a shelf happens, there's all this automation that happens. A new one will show up next day. Financial markets are completely, automated and all that, but the labor market is not. So we're like, God, there's got to be a way to, to fix that. So that's what Oplign was all about. It's like, hey, let's find a way that can, organize and structure the labor market like the other markets are structured. So we like, oh, like, man, if we can put everything on a common backbone, on a common syntax, that allows us to freely exchange individual skills, with job descriptions. So when we started, we first like, oh, let's use the NAICS codes, the Department of Labor's NAICS codes, that they've already kind of structured the market, and those are a complete mess. I mean, I think they look clean in 1950s,
Right.
but now there's like, there's separate codes for blueberry pickers and raspberry pickers, and it's just like, oh man, that's a mess, So then we try to, find there's some other, architecture out there that didn't work. So we we're like, well, hey, let's focus on the veteran market. If we can organize and datafy or digitize the veteran market, architecture, labor architect, skill set architecture, that covers down to 90% of the rest of the civilian labor market. So that's what we started doing. We built a common database that can automatically collect skills of an individual and then compare them to the labor market. So that kind of started in 2017. By 2019, we had a workable solution. But it took that long because we had like almost hand over hand to understand what each MOS or Navy enlisted code can do. We're like, all right, an Army 11 Bravo. All right, what can they do? Well, it's easy to go, oh, they can do security stuff because they're infantry and they can, live in the woods by themselves, all that kind of stuff. Like, well, yeah, but there's all these other implied tasks to be an infantryman. They have to, maintain their weapon. They have to understand, how the Jeep and the mechanics work and all that. So we were able to identify all the implied tasks of each of those MOSs, and then we just put zeros and ones behind them, So then our first big break was we had Verizon took a chance on us and said, hey, our recruiters have no idea what veterans can do. And they're like, oh, well, we can translate all that for them. And, so we can equip your recruiters with a tool that will automatically tell them what jobs that these candidates align to. And you can use that as the foundation. So that's kind of how that's what we did.
Yeah.
So now, that Verizon, who are still our customers, led us to getting USAA, which led us to getting Amazon. And now, I think we have 11 or 12 Fortune 100 companies using it, and over 100 companies and organizations using our platform, but on the veteran side, we get about maybe 200 new veterans into our system a day.
Wow. That's amazing.
Using the platform. And it's all, it really is that, back to business school and all that network effect. It's like, as we get more companies using it, that makes it more attractive for, veterans coming out, and then more veterans coming in, more companies want to,
Totally.
It. So
totally.
Yeah, we're getting really close to where it's starting to really propagate, everywhere,
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, from my perspective, it's an absolute no-brainer. And I think anybody who has ever once in their life looked for a job will feel the pain that you just described. And everybody has asked themselves, like, why is this system what it is? So it's really awesome to hear what you're doing.
Yeah, because I think the system, again, because I said, because it's all analog and it's, it's a word search matching going on. Because of that, there's this whole ecosystem built around that. That now there's all these different companies use the applicant tracking systems. And that's why people apply. They have to send out 300 resumes to get one bounce back,
right? Because
it goes into this black hole. And then unfortunately, more often than not, like a 26-year-old recruiter who really has no idea what the military can do kind of sees like, this guy's a striker maintainer. I don't even know what a striker is next,
right.
And it just kind of goes away. So we're trying to like eliminate, all that. And then the veterans, they're given, hacking methods like, all right, well, put all these keywords in the margins of your resume in white, and then some machine will pick up the keywords and put you in a good pile, or the best is like, hey, use your network, and it's not everyone has a really good network. A majority of the individuals coming out of the military, their network is, in the spirit of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, they have 1 degree,
Right.
But, so we're trying to extend that network and put it on a platform that gives them a fighting chance, and also gives them the awareness of like, wow, these are my skill sets, and I had no idea that Pepsi or the Toyota plant in Kentucky would want me. Now they do.
Yeah.
That's also what we're trying to. That earlier when I said like 60% of those veterans leave their job in the first year, if somehow we can get them better alignment at the beginning, then they'll most likely find a better place and maybe drop that to 40%. I don't know.
Yeah, I 100% agreed. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
everything you're saying completely tracks, and I could totally see how leaving within 1 year would get reduced in terms of percentage of how many times
Yeah.
how often that happens. And I want to take everything that you're just saying and go to the segment where I ask our guests translatable skills, military to typically built environment, but in this case, civilian profession. And I think you probably be the most expert in this space based on all of what you just said. What are you seeing as like a typical I mean, you could give it as specific to you, or you can give it as like a general framework of how you see veterans translating skill sets to civilian profession.
You mean like how what do you sorry, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah, no worries. So what I mean by that is like, how are you able to translate your military profession to the civilian workforce?
yeah, I think it's the devil's in the details. I hate to say that, but it's that like every job description has a hey, here's a title, and then what the skill sets they need. I think that's where the magic happens. Is like, one, if you understand what the skills are required, that's like that's what they want. That's what they're asking for. Whatever the title is, those are MacGuffins. They're just placeholders, because everyone has different, vernacular on what they do.
Right.
But then that's the same model for veterans coming out. Like if you take a, like a bosun's mate out of the Navy, that person, knows a lot about OSHA requirements and hazmat, because of the painting and all that. Works with lots of, pneumatic powered tools to do their job. I mean, these are great skill sets that they would not put on a resume at all.
Right.
They would just say, oh, I was in the Navy for this long, and I know leadership, and I, know how to counsel and develop individuals, and task oriented. They would default and backslide into these like, toothless like skills that really no one cares. Like, oh great, but it's like, oh yeah, I manage the tool locker, of tools that cost over $1 million, and I know how to repair a needle gun, and I've worked with 40 different types of hazmat chemicals, paint and thinner. That's the stuff that would get any manufacturer like excited. But that person would probably never put those on their resume, just because they completely undervalue what those skills are. That's where, again, like that's where the money is, but that's where the magic is too. It's those all those implied inherent skill sets that an individual has that get overlooked.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Oplign is doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. And in your so that was exactly what I was kind of asking in terms of what you see and how these are translating. But I want to ask for you specifically, like, what have you seen in your own journey in terms of translatable skills?
Yeah, I think it's again, being an officer in the military and then going through MBA program and being into the like thrown into like a Fortune 100 corporate development program, and then being in leadership roles in the defense contracting world. I think it's the soft skills. It's being able to like clearly articulate and set a vision for for whoever you're in charge of. Kind of show them like what the I don't know, the path to get there, to kind of understand what the requirements are for each individual's jobs. It's just all those kind of like soft, untangible skills that are required to like lead an organization. I think that's, but those are really hard to articulate,
right?
And you can, like, if you get to the interview phase of somewhere, but man, if you can't even get to the interview phase, you don't get a chance to, to express those.
Right. Which is, again, back to what Oplign is solving. And again, whatever, anyone who's ever applied for a job completely feels that pain where it just, your resume is in a black hole and you're going to get lucky 1 out of 300 times.
Right. And I know we'll never solve it all, but at least we can maybe cut it in half. Yeah. And those resumes, they drive us crazy. I mean, because there's so much time and effort spent on them. And for almost zero return.
Yeah.
So if there's a way we can, you're eventually going to need a resume, but at least if we get the right people talking, to the right people on the other side, now you can have a really good engaging question and, talk about fit and those soft skills and all that.
Agreed. Yeah. So closing out kind of the civilian profession segment here, given you are an entrepreneur and I am too, and very intrigued by kind of your journey, what kind of general advice do you have for entrepreneurship growth?
Yeah. As you know, this is a heavy lift, isn't it? I mean, it's
definitely is.
Yeah. You really got to be a jack of all trades. I mean, all the administrative stuff, having a business license and keeping up on that. And then, the bookkeeping, the marketing, it's just all across the board in the finance. So and it's kind of endless, but understanding how all those areas work and then how they feed, because of, you got to do them all, then, if you're in a position to, or you want to raise finances or raise funds, now you're dealing in the VC world, or maybe you're doing private funding, it's just, it's a heavy lift. And, I've been asked that before. And again, my advice is like, you got to know a little bit of all those, but there's plenty of help out there as well, that you can tap into, your own, network, people love to help. You just got to ask and go back. You got to knock on that door again.
Sure.
And ask,
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. There's the theme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. Awesome. So we're going to close out with our last two questions. One is your wellness practice. What does that look like for you? Sleep's number one.
It is surprising how important sleep is, and how surprising how it gets ignored. I mean, and then so I naturally wake up early, but I try to force myself to go to bed in a decent time, and then fitness, I still swim a lot. I'm I go to the Y and swim in the morning, 5 in the morning, come back, and then I pick up the dog and walk the dog, for that. And then, and especially me, my wife and my daughters are all really good eaters. And I think nutrition is a key part of that. So I'd say sleep, fitness, and good nutrition.
Yep.
And that, you'll be much healthier, and that gives you more energy, so that's kind of what I do now.
Yep. Well said. That's you can't beat that. Beat that.
It's easy to say, but yeah.
Right. Exactly. Of course. Do you still dive?
I don't. No, not really. It's funny. I get together with some of my Missouri Navy ROTC guys every once in a while, and we went to a Mizzou, Florida, University of Florida football game 3 years ago now. That was in Gainesville, Florida, and we dove. We did a dive on a cave, small little cave dive there.
Yeah.
So that was about 3 years ago. But
cool.
Now, yeah.
Awesome. So the last question here is any book or books you'd like to recommend?
It's funny, that meditations book by Marcus Aurelius. It's great. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's one that it's on my audiobooks. It's I don't think I have not finished it, but I turn it on and I'll listen to a session like about 2 or 3 times a week, and it's one I think it's kind of it's all stuff that intuitively. I mean, it makes sense, but it's nice to hear it, but I think that's a mainstay in my like kind of book cycles. It's simple rules that I think everyone knows, and it's kind of humbling, and kind of gives you a little reality check.
Yeah,
so
I'm a huge fan of that book, and what I find fascinating is obviously how old it is, yet how so applicable it still is, and so relevant, sensible, and all this. It's fascinating to me how like it doesn't age.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, awesome. Jeff, anything else I didn't ask you that you want to share?
No, yeah, thanks. I think we've gone 2 hours or something. So
something like that.
yeah.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Awesome. No, not at all. I really appreciate you jumping on, sharing your story. I learned a lot. I'm excited to share it. And thank you again for joining our mission here.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Jeff, hang on for a minute. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.